Hello YouTube and welcome back to Dare to Game. Today we are taking a look at a fan request for this week's TV Tuesday video. Today's request comes from Hellspeaker, and he said, make a list about crazies in the show. All the people who are crazy, weird, disgusting, disturbing, disturbed, like CERSEI and the new Hand of the Queen Maester, the Red Woman, etc. So, to simplify that a bit, I'll be doing the 10 worst characters from Game of Thrones, and since I have not read the books, this will only be including things from the show. So, let's dive on in. So, at number 10, we'll do a couple, that being STANNIS and SELYSE Baratheon. I know that these characters have a few redeeming qualities here and there, but for the most part, they're pretty bad. As far as STANNIS is concerned, first and foremost, his character is just a tragically boring one, and that was kind of his thing. But then they piled fanaticism and desperation on top, and boy did it make for a bad character. He really is just a pawn of Melisandre, and does any terrible thing she wishes, like murder his own brother, try to murder Gendry, burn lots of people for no reason other than that they don't believe in the Lord of Light, oh yeah, and burning his own daughter at the stake. But if STANNIS isn't bad enough, his batshit crazy wife puts this pairing over the top. While STANNIS just went along with all of the Lord of Light crap to get the throne, SELYSE was genuinely enamored by it. She is straight up insane. Hell, when we are first introduced to her, she is sitting in her room with a bunch of dead babies in jars. She watches with glee as her own brother is burned at the stake, and even before burning Shireen at the stake, she was just an all-around terrible mother who didn't love her only daughter, or at least tried really hard to make it look that way. So yeah, these Baratheons won't be missed. Number 9, GREGOR CLEGANE, aka the Mountain. While I know that there is a certain percentage of the population out there that is a major hard-on for the Mountain, I am not one of them. Yes, I understand that he is huge, but for me, that isn't enough character background to make a person interesting or likable. With Gregor, we can trace it all the way back to when he was a child, and tried to burn his brother to death for playing with one of his toys. At this point, I want to clarify, I don't care what the motivations were behind this. If I were his father, there would not have been a cover-up, there would have been some serious mental analysis and probably some form of rehabilitation for him after that. But moving on, we also see that he has uncontrollable rage. When vested at the Hand's tourney, he decapitates his own horse and tries to kill Loras Tyrell, and has to be stopped by the Hound. We then later hear that he is pillaging and raping his way across the Riverlands. The next time we see him, he is having prisoners of war tortured and killed at Harrenhal. We then find out that he murdered the Targaryen baby during the sack of King's Landing, and then raped Elia Martell while still covered in her infant's blood. And then he crushes Oberyn Martell's skull during a trial by combat. So needless to say, this guy is not the guy I would have hanging around my children. Number 8, Robin ARRYN. Now, while Robin isn't a rampaging sociopath, uncontrollable beast, or murderous wretch, he is still a really bad character. And I believe that if we were to, look 20 years down the road and see what he was like if he was in control of the Vale, I think he might be, a rampaging sociopath, uncontrollable beast, or murderous wretch. But for now, he is just a weak and whiny and probably insane little boy. Just judging from his appreciation for the finer things, like making people fly through the moon door, it is clear that the writers were like, okay, so here's this boy. Okay, and he's already getting a bit older. Yeah, okay. And he's still being breastfed. Wait, how old is he? I don't know, like 12 or 13? Oh, that's messed up. Yeah, but it's cool. Oh yeah, and he's also obsessed with murdering visitors, and he whines a lot. Perfect! I mean, if we take a look at this character, it's clear how annoying he is meant to be. Sansa slapped him because he was being a twat. This is the same Sansa that had survived Joffrey and Cersei without ever raising a hand to either. It's pretty bad when, out of all the crazy people in the show, none are quite as hard to endure on screen as Robin. Number 7, the WAIF. Arya's training with the Faceless Men should have been exciting and the culmination of her story up to that point. Thanks to the WAIF, Arya learning to be no one was mostly a tedious and groan-inducing experience. While Jaqen H'ghar nailed the whole murderous Dumbledore thing Game of Thrones was going for, the WAIF was a sad excuse of a Draco Malfoy substitute. For being a part of an organization that was meant to teach the virtues of being as inconspicuous as possible, the WAIF was an overload of personality. And not a remotely interesting personality either. The WAIF's laser-focused hatred of Arya was exhausting. Though apparently the star pupil of the Faceless Men, the WAIF exhibited all the qualities that Jaqen was trying to dissuade in Arya. The WAIF was emotionally unstable, profoundly unsubtle, and an all-around betrayal of everything the House of Black and White seemed to be going for. The WAIF was not only an annoying character who was brought to life by a barely passable performance, she also did a lot of damage to the lore of the show. The waif made it seem like everything the Faithless Men were teaching was a hypocrisy, which cannot have been the intention of the character. I'm going to chalk this one up to an oversight. Number 6, Sir ALLISER THORNE. Seriously, with this guy, I can't be the only one who hates him. For no good reason other than maybe Jon Snow was a bit of a douche at the beginning of the show, he immediately decided that Jon was his enemy. This would make sense if the rest of the Night's Watch were a bunch of great, noble, obedient people, but they aren't. The very fact that Jon, a well-trained, skilled, good person, willingly joined the Night's Watch so he could serve the realm should have immediately ingratiated him to the higher-ups. I'm not saying that they should have immediately given him a position of authority, but seeing as he was better with a sword than literally everyone there, I don't know, maybe he could have been the Master-at-Arms? But instead of doing anything rational or logical, ALLISER THORNE immediately starts to attack Jon. Despite Jon's advice, which was sound I may add, to flood the tunnels when the Wildling army was approaching, he shoots it down simply because Jon suggested it. And this attitude lasts all the way up till his death, which was an execution by Jon as the Lord Commander after ALLISER and several other Night's Watch members murdered Jon for letting the Wildlings through the wall, just so they don't all get murdered by the Night King. So I think ALLISER THORNE has earned a solid number 6 spot here. Number 5, Melisandre, also known as the Red Woman. The night is dark and full of terrors. So is Melisandre. The Red Priestess, at the heart of Stannis Baratheon's drive for the Iron Throne, is a manipulative sorceress who isn't above sending shadow demons on assassination missions or sacrificing princesses for her overall goal. With this character, we have a personification of the idea of the ends justifying the means. With the exception of bringing Jon back to life, I can't think of a time that she has done anything good on the show. As bad as the Baratheons are, she is the one pulling all the strings. And I'm not going to sit here and count all the burning she influenced, but for the entire first season of screen time for her, there were always people burning in the background. She sexes up Stannis, a married man, to make a shadowy demon baby, which she then births and sends off to kill Renly Baratheon. She tries to have Gendry killed for more blood magic, and in the end influences Stannis into burning his only daughter at the stake, under the guise of a sacrifice to help them win the war. But, and get this, it doesn't work. They burn Shireen, and as a result, a ton of Stannis' men abandon him. His wife kills herself, and Stannis, along with his whole army, are wiped out by the Boltons. She then just casually strolls back up to Castle Black to get a new pawn, and that's where Jon Snow comes in. Seriously, if it hadn't been for Jon's natural distrust of her, and Davos trying to kill her, we might have seen all of this garbage again. In any case, I'm glad she is gone, or at least until she shows up with the Flaming Hand at the 11th hour. Number 4, Viserys Targaryen. This guy never really had a chance in the show. He was openly represented as the Mad King 2.0 from the very first moment we see him on screen. We are meant to know that this is not a good guy. His first few minutes of screen time are spent fondling his nude little sister, before letting her know that he would let all the Dothraki and their horses rape her if it meant that he would get the Iron Throne. So that's a bit unpleasant. He was simultaneously presumptuous and pathetic throughout his relatively short run in Season 1. Oftentimes referring to himself as the Last Dragon, and threatening Dany that she doesn't want to awake the dragon, which sounds like a euphemism for his penis. He does an awful lot of threatening, and almost gets himself killed by a Dothraki blood rider on at least one occasion. He then also tries to steal Daenerys' dragon eggs, only to be stopped by Jorah Mormont. In the end, Khal Drogo gives him the golden crown that he so desires, but it's more of a golden helmet, and it kills Viserys in a gruesome and satisfying manner. Needless to say, this character was a terrible guy who got his quicker than most on this list, but in many people's opinion, including my own, not soon enough. Number 3, Ramsay Bolton, or Snow. Wow, this guy is arguably the evilest character on the show, and that is a hard-fought title. I've heard many people point out that he would have been so much worse than Joffrey, but he didn't have the power. And those people are probably right. But in any case, he is still wicked bad. So, where to start with this guy? Well, there was the season-long torture session with Theon Greyjoy where he flayed him, mentally abused him, and mutilated him until Theon was no longer Theon. Sure, when all this started, I was like, well, Theon is getting what he deserves because of all that stupid shit he did at Winterfell. But it went way too far. Ramsay was established here to not only be a psychotic maniac, but also a sadistic fiend. We then get to see him do a whole slew of terrible things that I will quickly summarize. He and his girlfriend hunt down and murder another girl because his girlfriend was jealous or something. He marries and then tortures and rapes Sansa. He flays more people, including Battermen who wouldn't pay their taxes, all the Ironborn at Moat Cailin, and an old lady who tried to help Sansa. He then performs a coup where he murders his own father, and his stepmother, and her infant son. He then goes to war with Jon Snow, murders Rickon Stark, and leads to the Battle of the Bastards. So this guy has an awful lot of blood on his hands. Ultimately, his death was justice, as Sansa fed him to his own starving hounds. I personally do not miss him at all. Number 2, Joffrey Baratheon. So the runner-up here is of course Joffrey, because who else could it be? From the very beginning this character was vile, so it's time for the play-by-play. In episode 2 we see him being a spoiled brat, and making fun of the grief that the Starks are enduring due to the attempted murder of Bran. Then we see him trying to act like the big man on campus in front of Sansa. He decides to do this by mutilating a butcher's boy with his sword after finding him playing with Arya by the river. Arya hits him with her stick so that the butcher's boy could get away and disarms him. And boy do I wish she would have just stuck Joffrey with the pointy end right there. He then tells his own story about Arya and the butcher's boy assaulting him, which gets the butcher's boy murdered and Sansa's direwolf lady executed. We are then treated to several seasons of more of the same, him having Ned Stark executed, abusing Sansa, having more people killed or humiliated than killed. When Tyrion sends him some whores to hopefully ease his pubescent frustration, he has one of them beat the other one with his scepter, presumably to death. And later, he tortures and kills another whore with his crossbow because she was working for Varys or Tyrion. Honestly, I can't even remember what was going on there. Then we get the Purple Wedding, which is where Margaery Tyrell and Joffrey were married. And Joffrey demonstrates just how much of an asshat he can be, as he spends the whole time posturing as a great warrior king, and humiliating Tyrion as much as possible. All of this before we get the most satisfying death in the show so far, when that little shit finally choked to death on poison. We later find out that it was Olenna Tyrell and Littlefinger that plotted to do him in. But honestly, 90% of the kingdoms probably sighed in relief when this happened. My only regret was how relatively quick his death ended up being. Number 1, Cersei Lannister. She is by far the absolute worst, most dislikable, and in my opinion, most hated person ever on screen. I would trade all of the other people still being alive on this list for her to finally get what is coming to her. And if she doesn't get a death that is equal to all the terrible things that she has been responsible for by the end of the show, I will be supremely pissed. I cannot stand how people are always trying to portray her as a tragic victim of circumstance. She is a murderous bitch who is constantly making everything worse for everyone. She is a lying, manipulative, drunken, sociopathic whore with no regard for anyone but herself. One of the worst tropes in the show is everyone talking about how her only saving grace is that she loves her children. Nope, that is utter bullshit. She does not love her children. She loves only one thing, and that is power. Everything she has ever done has been with sole regard to her own status and power. Joffrey is the product of her terrible nature, because he is just a male version of her, albeit a little weaker, but all the same character flaws are ever more present in her. She is responsible for all of her children's deaths. As far as Joffrey is concerned, an argument could be made that she is the least responsible for his death out of the three. But as I said, he was the terrible person he was because of the way she raised him. Not to mention, he wouldn't have existed at all if it wasn't for her incestuous affair with Jaime. Then we have her daughter, Princess Myrcella, who despite actually being a good person, also died because of Cersei's actions. Tyrion sent her away to Dawn before the attack on Blackwater to protect her from the fate that befell the Targaryen children when the Lannister army took King's Landing during Robert's rebellion. She was perfectly happy there and would have been perfectly safe there if Cersei wouldn't have had Oberyn killed in a trial by combat with the Mountain over her ridiculous belief that Tyrion murdered Joffrey. All of that garbage was a direct result of her hate-fueled crusade against Tyrion, and that is what got Myrcella killed. Then with Tommen, it's the worst of all. He could have been a great king. He had all the makings of someone that could really grow into that role. He was kind, intelligent, and merciful. But Cersei really demonstrated her inability to lose power here. She armed the Faith Militant and put them in power. So everything they did was her fault. She couldn't stand the fact that she was no longer going to be queen, even though Margaery and Tommen would have been a great sect to rule the Seven Kingdoms. So she plotted, schemed, and murdered her way back to the top, with absolutely no regard for him. And in the end, he committed suicide. So don't give me any of that tragic victim bullshit, or go on about how much she loved her children. She is an evil, power-hungry woman who needs to be put down for good. Wow, that was very therapeutic. It was good to get that out of my system. That being said, it was hard to narrow down the list to 10 names. There are so many others that I would have really liked to include here. Because if there's one thing this show does really well, it is making characters that we all hate. I tried to make this list a bit more varied than just the main megalomaniacs. But if you have anyone that you would have liked to see on this list, let me know down there in the comments. Otherwise, that's all for today. Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. If you did, I can assume you liked the content, and hopefully you'll subscribe and turn on the notification bell. If you haven't already, check out these links I have on the screen to see me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you like my content and would like to support what I do here, there's a link to my Patreon account in the description, and a donation would be much appreciated. In any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day.